don't know how far we're going to get into this today, but we'll give it a shot. If you printed out the outline, you notice that we're trying to do chapters 3 through 11 today. Got a lot of material. Before I get started, first I want to give credit where credit is due. Again, I'm using, in addition to the Bible, I'm using 2 reference books. The first is Job, a New Translation with Introduction and Commentary by Marvin H. Pope. He's a professor of Northwest Semitic Languages at Yale. The second book is Job, a New Translation by Edward L. Greenstein, Professor Emeritus of Bible at Bar Ilan University in Israel. Now, I'm going to be actually going through the text today. So if you have a Bible handy, you might want to open it up to the book of Job and follow along. We're starting this section that is all poetry today. In fact, most of the book of Job is poetry until we get to the last chapter. I'll try to point out things that I think are important, or maybe there's a question in meaning that you might have with some of these verses. Translation of poetry is problematic sometimes. Let me give you a personal example. When I was about 8 or 9 years old, it was Christmas time, and my mother had the radio on, and they were playing Christmas music. The song "O Holy Night" came on, and my mother expressed the opinion that she didn't like that song. And I was a little surprised about that, but she said, well, the words are all about praising the night. There's nothing in there about God or Jesus Christ. Now, fast forward a few years, I was taking French in high school. One of our projects was to go out Christmas caroling and sing carols in French. That's when I discovered that "O Holy Night" was originally written in French. And if you translate the words literally, it goes, "At night, at midnight, the Christ child comes to take away original sin." See, that's what my mother was looking for, but the meaning was obscured by the translation. To cut the translators some slack, of course, fitting translated words to the music is a very difficult thing to do. But anyway, that's one of the problems you can get into when you're trying to translate poetry. Now, the text for today, this is Hebrew poetry, and I've mentioned in an earlier class that Hebrew poetry does not depend on rhyme and meter. Hebrew poetry depends on what's called parallelism, that is, in pairs of lines, the second line reinforces the first line. So that's what we're going to be looking for. So to start out, this is Job's opening discourse. So this will be Job speaking. You remember, he's with his friends. His 3 friends came to visit him. And so far, they have stayed silent for 7 days. He was so disfigured Job was so disfigured by his suffering that his friends at first didn't recognize him. So they sat with him for 7 days. Now we're starting with chapter 3, and Job begins to speak. After this, Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. Job said, "Let the day perish in which I was born, and the night that said a man-child is conceived. Let that day be darkness. May God above not seek it, or light shine on it. Let gloom and deep darkness claim it. Let clouds settle upon it. Let the blackness of the day terrify it. That night, let thick darkness seize it. Let it not rejoice among the days of the year. Let it not come into the number of the months. Yes, let that night be barren. Let no joyful cry be heard in it. Let those curse it who curse the sea, those who are skilled to rouse up Leviathan." And I think I talked about Leviathan in an earlier class, but I'll repeat that. Leviathan was a part not only of Hebrew mythology, but other Middle Eastern mythologies. It was a monster that represented cosmic chaos. And one of the things that supposedly God had to do during creation is to is to cast that chaos away and imprison it. And God imprisoned it in the sea. So that's the reference to the sea in Leviathan here. Let the stars of its dawn be dark. Let it hope for light but have none. May it not see the eyelids of the morning. That deserves an explanation. Eyelids of the morning is an idiom in Hebrew for the first light of day. So if you want to maybe translate this with a little bit more meaning, but keep the poetry, you might say, may it not see a glimmer of the dawn. That would work. Because it did not shut the doors of my mother's womb and hide trouble from my eyes. That is, life's troubles. Now, in the next 3 verses, I'm going to move a verse around here. Verse 16 should come between verses 11 and 12. Usually this happens when a scribe is copying verses and skips one. And then when he finally realizes what has happened, he has a choice. There's no backspace key when you're writing on ink in parchment, so he can throw out the page he has already started and start again, or he can add the missing material where he currently is. And that's probably how these verses got out of order. So verse 16, it goes between 11 and 12. So they read, why did I not die at birth, come forth from the womb and expire? Or why was I not buried like a stillborn child, like an infant that never sees the light? Why were there knees to receive me or breasts for me to suck? Now you see why those verses go together. They're all talking about a child who's born. Just an explanation about why were there knees to receive me? I have read 2 possible interpretations of that. The one I like the least is when whoever is helping the mother give birth, midwife or whoever, is kneeling on her knees to receive the baby when it's born. That's the one I don't like. I don't like it because there's no parallelism between that thought and the next one, which is clearly about feeding a child. So the other explanation I've read is that the knees there refer to the mother's lap. So in feeding a child, it's on the mother's lap, right? So that fits in with the parallelism of this verse. Now, verse 13, now I would be lying down and quiet. I would be asleep, then I would be at rest with kings and counselors of the earth who rebuild ruins for themselves. Rebuilding ruins sounds like a really odd thing to do. Ruins, it turns out, the Hebrew word for ruins is very close to the Hebrew word that means pyramids. In other words, lavish burial places. So we have to at least consider the possibility that this should read, who build lavish burial places for themselves. Verse 15, or with princes who have gold, who fill their houses with silver. We skip verse 16, we've already read that. 17, there the wicked cease from troubling, and there the weary are at rest. This probably should be more like, there the restless are no longer troubled, and there the weary are at rest. That fits better with both in terms of parallelism and just how it reads. Verse 18, there the prisoners are at ease together. They do not hear the voice of the taskmaster. The small and the great are there, and the slaves are free from their masters or from their oppressors. That's another possible translation. Verse 20, why is light given to one in misery and life to the bitter in soul, who long for death, but it does not come, and dig for it more than for hidden treasures, who rejoice exceedingly and are glad when they find the grave? Why is light given to one who cannot see the way, whom God has fenced in? Now, this is a very ironic statement here. Remember back in chapter 1, the Satan is complaining about how God is protecting Job. 1 verse 10, have you not put a fence around him and his house and all that he has on every side? So the fence here is it's a fence for protection. Now here we turn to a fence as a prison, whom God has fenced in. That's the way that Job is thinking about this fence now, as a trapping him in. For my sighing comes like my bread, and my groanings are poured out like water, or are doled out like water. So as regular as eating and drinking are his sighing and his groanings. Truly the thing that I fear comes upon me, and what I dread befalls me. I am not at ease, nor am I quiet. I have no rest, but trouble comes. That's the end of chapter 3. Now we have another misplaced section that I need to talk about. This is all of chapter 4, verses 12 through 21. This is such a large section that it probably wasn't a copying mistake. There was probably in an ancient manuscript, a couple of the pages got swapped, and that put a whole section out of order. And then, of course, scribes for centuries after that just copied it that way. So I'm not going to move on here to chapter 4, verse 1. I'll come back to that in its appropriate place. Now we go to chapter 4, verse 12. This is, Job has a vision or a revelation from God. He says, now a word came stealing to me. My ear received the whisper of it. Amid thoughts from visions of the night, when deep sleep falls on mortals, dread came upon me and trembling, which made all my bones shake. A spirit glided past my face. The hair of my flesh bristled. It stood still, but I could not discern its appearance. A form was before my eyes. There was silence. Then I heard a voice. Can mortals be righteous before God? Can human beings be pure before their maker? Even in his servants, he puts no trust. And his angel is talking about God here. Even in his servants, he puts no trust. And his angels, he charges with error. How much more those who live in houses of clay? That's not literal houses. That refers to human bodies, as we see in the following line. Whose foundation is in the dust. Human beings are made from the dust of the earth, who are crushed like a moth. Between morning and evening, they are destroyed. They perish forever without any regarding it. Their tent cord is plucked up within them, and they die devoid of wisdom. Probably better would be their tent peg is plucked up away from them. What happens when you pull out the pegs of the tent? Collapses. And that's what it's talking about here. And they die devoid of wisdom. Now, that's the end of Job's speech. We have to go back to chapter 4, verse 1 to read the next part, which is the first of Job's friends, Eliphaz. And this is beginning his speech. Do you have any comments or questions so far about what Job said? Mary?
Yeah, so verse 17, here's how it reads in the translation I have. I don't know, this is my mother's Bible. Oh, it's the New King James. So it says, can a mortal be more righteous than God? And I don't think that's how you, would you read 17 again?
Yes, this is the NRSV. I have, can mortals be righteous before God? Can human beings be pure before their maker?
Yeah, and both of and this is, can a mortal be more righteous than God? Can a man be more pure than his maker? Interesting translation, huh?
Yeah, it is.
There's a footnote in my NRSV that says more than. So I think there's some unclarity as to if it's what it should be.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's a good point. Sometimes if there are multiple ancient sources, they differ a bit because of copying errors or whatever. So if you have a Bible that has study notes, it will point out when there's maybe a difference between different ancient sources.
But that's a big difference to ask if people can be more righteous than God or simply righteous. I mean, that's a whole difference in the food chain.
Yeah, it is. And in fact, as we go along, I think what the NRSV has, can mortals be righteous before God, is a question that keeps getting asked. And that's why that's why I tend to agree with what I have here, this NRSV translation. This is going to come up over and over again. Can we come before God? Is it possible? Janet?
On the subject of ancient sources, when you get to New Testament work, there are manuscripts in Greek of the New Testament. There's 50 or 60 respectable manuscripts, and they differ massively. And so when people say that, they think that the New Testament is the word of God, literally, you have to say which words, because the words are different in different manuscripts.
Yes, very good point. As you said, the New Testament we have much more of a trouble with that than the Old Testament. There are not that many surviving sources, not like the New Testament, where there are very many, and very many of them differ. Thanks. Claudia.
I've got Eugene Peterson's translation, and he says, how can mere mortals be more righteous than God? And how can humans be purer than their creator?
Okay. Okay, thanks for that. Anything else? Okay, let's move on to Eliphaz the Temanite and what he has to say. Now, Eliphaz starts out with some kind words. That doesn't last long, but he starts out all right. Chapter 4, verse 1, then Eliphaz the Temanite answered, if one ventures a word with you, will you be offended? So he's taken a baby step, right? See, you have instructed many. You have strengthened the weak hands. Your words have supported those who were stumbling, and you have made firm the feeble knees. But now it has come to you, and you are impatient. It touches you, and you are dismayed. Is not your fear of God your confidence, and the integrity of your ways your hope? So he's starting out being supportive, but reminding Job that, well, bad things have happened to people in the past, and in fact, you have been supportive of them. Well, now it's your turn, he says essentially. Unfortunately, Job's friends are not going to offer the same level of support that Eliphaz is talking about here. He goes on then. He believes in that the justice of God is correct. God is always correct in his judgment. So, if God is punishing you, you must have done something wrong. Verse 7. Think now, who that was innocent ever perished, or where were the upright cut off? As I have seen, those who plow iniquity and sow trouble reap the same. By the breath of God they perish, and by the blast of his anger they are consumed. The roar of the lion, the voice of the fierce lion, and the teeth of the young lions are broken. The strong lion perishes for lack of prey, and the whelps of the lionesses and of the lioness are scattered. I want to say a word about that. The word lion is repeated many times in these two verses. That is not usual with Hebrew poetry, but usually you have one line uses one word and then the next line uses another word. But the solution to that question is, in Hebrew, apparently, there are 5 different words for lion. And those different words are used in the Hebrew version of this. We can't do that in English. So we're sort of stuck with this translation that sounds a little bit repetitive. That's the end of chapter 4. Well, the section of Eliphaz that is in chapter 4, that's the end, because we've already gone through 12 through 21. So we move now to a continuation of the discourse of Eliphaz beginning in chapter 5. Call now, is there anyone who will answer you? To which of the holy ones will you turn? Holy ones refers to the members of God's court, right? We talked about that before. Surely vexation kills the fool, and jealousy slays the simple. He's taking to task Job's rage against what is happening to him. He said that rage is a dangerous emotion. Verse 3, I have seen fools taking root, but suddenly I curse their dwelling. Or possibly suddenly their dwelling was cursed. Their children are far from safety. They are crushed in the gate. Mentioning children at this point is pretty cruel, because at this point, Job's children were all killed, all 10 of his children. So Eliphaz is not being subtle here. They are crushed in the gate, and there is no one to deliver them. The hungry eat their harvest, and they take it even out of the thorns, and the thirsty pant after their wealth. The hungry and thirsty may not be literal. It may be famine takes their harvest, and drought destroys their wealth. Okay, the next two verses have an interesting play on words in Hebrew. For misery does not come from the earth, nor does trouble sprout from the ground, but human beings are born to trouble just as sparks fly upward. The play on words in Hebrew is that earth and ground, the Hebrew word is Adamah. Human being is Adam, okay? So Adamah, Adam. We might reproduce that word play in English if we translate it in the following way. Nor does trouble sprout from humus, but humans are born to trouble, okay? That carries the word play over in English. Verse 8, as for me, I would seek God, and to God I would commit my cause. In other words, plead my case. And then Job's going to counter that later. He does great things and unsearchable, marvelous things without number. He gives rain on the earth and sends waters on the field. He sets on high those who are lowly, and those who mourn are lifted to safety. He frustrates the devices of the crafty so that their hands achieve no success. He takes the wise in their own craftiness, and the schemes of the wily are brought to a quick end. They meet with darkness in the daytime and grope at noonday as in the night. So he's singing the praises of God, praising God. God is the solution to your problems, is what he's saying. Verses 15 and 16 here. But he saves the needy from the sword of their mouth, from the hand of the mighty, so the poor have hope, and injustice shuts its mouth. Let me say a word about sword of their mouth. The sword of the mouth usually refers to angry words or curses or something like that. Again, to make it a little bit more poetic, we might translate this, but he saves the simple from the curses of the crafty, and the needy from the hand of the mighty. So the poor have hope, and injustice is silent. It keeps a little bit more of the poetry that way. Verse 17, how happy is the one whom God reproves. Therefore do not despise the discipline of the Almighty. Eliphaz is saying, you know, we really ought to be happy because of God's discipline. Well, it's easy for him to say he's not going through what Job is going through, but that's his point of view. For he wounds, but he binds up. He strikes, but his hands heal. He will deliver you from 6 troubles. In 7, no harm shall touch you. In famine, he will redeem you from death. In war, from the power of the sword. You shall be hidden from the scourge of the tongue, and shall not fear destruction when it comes. As destruction and famine, at destruction and famine, you shall laugh, and shall not fear the wild animals on earth. For you shall be in league with the stones of the field, and the wild animals shall be at peace with you. You shall know that your tent is safe, You shall inspect your fold and miss nothing. You shall know that your descendants will be many, and your offspring like the grass of the earth. You shall come to your grave in ripe old age, as a shock of grain comes up to the threshing floor in its season. You don't harvest raw grain, right? You leave it grow until it is mature. That's what's going to happen to you if you follow God. See, we have searched this out. It is true. Hear and know it for yourself. So that's the opinion of Eliphaz. We're at the end of Eliphaz's first discourse. Any comments or questions on this section?
Okay, so we know, okay, I'll just say it quickly. So we know that this is his opinion.
Yes.
And yet a lot of this gets quoted, happy is the man who God reproves or God punishes.
Yes.
I mean, as if this is a truth of God. It's just interesting.
Yes, it is. This is definitely his opinion, right? He believes in the constancy of God's judgment, that if we are suffering, we must deserve it, right? That's his opinion.
Well, and it seems to me that looking at this through a 21st century lens, it's hard for me to not see this as accepting abuse. There's a difference between discipline and abuse. And the Eliphaz seems to be promoting a culture in which any kind of abuse is tolerable if it is given to you by the person who is your superior. And we don't think that way anymore. And so I've got to shift my mind back to their perspective, that from their point of view, cause and effect, if something bad happens to you, then you must not be faithful enough.
So blame the victim.
Yeah, and unfortunately that persists, as Mary says. People use this kind of text to promote that point of view.
Yes, both good points, Mary and Pat. Anybody else?
Well, I just joined this class late, unfortunately, but I'm just wondering, aren't some of these words like in the Psalms and things like that? That you're not doing it right, and if you do it right, God will give you a long life and things like that. Aren't Psalms and places like that? Proverbs?
Yes, and we're going to get to a section in which Job quotes from Psalm 8, but uses that quotation in a sarcastic manner. So yes, some of these words are definitely in the Psalms.
Okay, because I have to say that I have never understood the book of Job.
Yeah. Well, it's tough. I mean, when you've got verses that are out of order, it's really tough.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, now Job responds, chapter 6. Then Job answered, "Oh, that my vexation were weighed and all my calamity laid in the balances. For then it would be heavier than the sand of the sea. Therefore my words have been rash." Probably should be, "Therefore my words have seemed rash to you," right? He's saying, well, I have had so much calamity happen to me. That's the reason I'm speaking so strongly. Verse 4, "For the arrows of the Almighty are in me. My spirit drinks their poison. The terrors of God are arrayed against me. Does the wild ass bray over its grass, or the ox low over its fodder?" Which means if the wild ass is out in the field eating grass, it's not braying. It brays when there is no grass. When the ox is eating its fodder, it doesn't low. That happens if there is no fodder, if it's hungry. "Can that which is tasteless be eaten without salt? Or is there any flavor in the juice of mallows?" Apparently the juice of mallows is tasteless and disgusting. I don't know. I've never tasted the juice of mallows, but apparently that was the case. Now, it's interesting that the Hebrew words for flavor, The Hebrew word for flavor is similar to the one for reason. So you could say, is there any flavor or is there any reason? Either one would work.
Steve?
My appetite refuses to touch them. They are like food that is loathsome to me. So he's saying this about the words of Eliphaz.
Yeah.
Verse 8, oh, that I might have my request and that God would grant my desire, that it would please God to crush me and that he would let loose his hand and cut me off. This would be my consolation. I would even exult in unrelenting pain, for I have not denied the words of the Holy One. That would be his consolation. What is my strength that I should wait? And what is my end that I should be patient? Is my strength the strength of stones, or is my flesh bronze? And he's saying, I'm only human, you know, I can't stand this. In truth, I have no help in me, and any resource is driven from me. Then he moves on to more directly criticize what Eliphaz has just said. For those who withhold kindness from a friend, forsake the fear of the Almighty. My companions are treacherous, like a torrent bed, like freshets that pass away, that run dark with ice, turbid with melting snow. Let me say a little bit more about that. In the Middle East, there are streams that have water in them only part of the year. Those are called wadis. During the snow melt in the spring, they have torrents of water in them. But as the summer heat, as the snow finishes melting and the summer heat comes, those wadis dry up. So they're inconsistent. You can't depend on them. He's comparing his friends to that. In the time of heat, they disappear. When it is hot, they vanish from their place. The caravans turn aside from their course. They go up into the waste and perish. Caravans looking for water and finding none. The caravans of Tema look, the travelers of Sheba hope. Tema and Sheba. Tema is either in northern Arabia or southern Edom. Sheba is in southern Arabia. You might remember the queen of Sheba visited Solomon at one point. They are disappointed because they were confident. They come there and are confounded. Such you have now become to me. You see my calamity and are afraid. Job hits the nail on the head here. The reason, underlying reason that his friends are doing this is because they're scared. Because if they can't find any specific thing that would explain what happened to Job, then that opens up the possibility that those things are going to happen to them too. That's what they're afraid of. Have I said, make me a gift, or from your wealth offer a bribe from me, or save me from an opponent's hand, or ransom me from the hand of my oppressors? Verse 24, teach me and I will be silent. Make me understand how I have gone wrong. How forceful are honest words, but your reproof, what does it reprove? Do you think you can reprove words as if the speech of the desperate were wind? You would even cast lots over the orphan and bargain over your friend. So betting over the orphan, bargaining over friends. That's pretty severe. But of course, Eliphaz was pretty severe to Job. Verse 28, but now be pleased to look at me, for I will not lie to your face. Turn, I pray, let no wrong be done. Turn now, my vindication is at stake. Is there any wrong on my tongue? Cannot my taste discern calamity? So what he's saying here is, if there's any false speech on my tongue should taste it and know that it's false. Sort of a metaphor. Job goes on in chapter 7. Do not human beings have a hard service on earth? Are not their days like days of a laborer, like a slave who longs for the shadow, like the laborers who look for their wages? So he's comparing human life to slave labor. So I'm allotted months of emptiness, and nights of misery are apportioned to me. I discovered in my research that in the Hebrew, months of emptiness means literally moons of futility. I wish the translator had used that, because I think it's much more poetic than months of emptiness. Verse 4, when I lie down, I say, when shall I rise? But the night is long, and I am full of tossing until dawn. My flesh is clothed with worms and dirt. My skin hardens, then breaks out again. Some commentators have thought that that means scabs. I think probably scars is closer to the meaning of my skin hardens. My days, the next verse has a great metaphor. My days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle and come to their end without hope. So I don't know if you ever heard, if you've ever saw a weaver with an old style loom, and there are threads that run in one direction, and there's a shuttle that moves in another direction, dragging another thread between the first threads. So he says, my days are swifter than that shuttle that flies through the loom. Also, the Hebrew word for hope, tikwa, it can also mean thread. In Hebrew, if you're hanging by a thread, you're also hanging by a hope, because the word is exactly the same. So alternate translation, my days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle and come to their end when the thread runs out. Chapter 7, verse 7. Oh, this is another great metaphor in here. Remember that my life is a breath. My eye will never again see good. Breath. In Hebrew, as in Greek, the same word can mean spirit, breath, or wind. The word, let me read a few more verses and then I'll comment further. The eye that beholds me, in other words, that probably means God. The eye that beholds me will see me no more. While your eyes are upon me, I shall be gone. As the cloud fades and vanishes, so those who go down to Sheol do not come up. They return no more to their houses, and nor do their places know them anymore. Sheol is the abode of the dead, where souls of the dead sleep. They don't have any contact with anything, even with God. So as the cloud fades and vanishes, now this reminds me so much of the book of Ecclesiastes. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity and a chasing after wind. You know that from Ecclesiastes. The word vanity, in that context, think of the word vanish. The word in Hebrew is hebel. It's used to refer to, and when it's cold outside and you exhale and you see the vapor of your breath, that's hebel. It's there for an instant, but then it vanishes. You can't hold on to it. Now, the teacher in Ecclesiastes is talking about our earthly wealth. We accumulate wealth, but you can't take it with you. It's gone in an instant. Another comment about the word hebel. In Genesis, we learn of Cain and Abel. Abel is an English version of the word hebel. So even in Abel's name, we see that he's not going to be around for long. He's transitory, like the vapor of breath. So as the cloud fades and vanishes, so those who go down to Sheol do not come up. That's verse 9. There is the same thought. They return no more to their houses, nor do their places know them anymore. Therefore, I will not restrain my mouth. I will speak in the anguish of my spirit. There's spirit, wind again, breath again, right? I will complain in the bitterness of my soul. Am I the sea or the dragon that you set a guard over me? Again, this refers to Leviathan, the monster confined to the sea. When I say my bed will comfort me, my couch will ease my complaint, then you scare me with dreams and terrify me with visions, so that I would choose strangling and death rather than this body. I loathe my life. I would not live forever. Let me alone, for my days are a breath. Hebel, once again. A quote from Psalm 8, but sarcastically. What are human beings that you make so much of them, that you set your mind on them? Let me read the exact quote from Psalm 8, verse 4. What are human beings that you are mindful of them, mortals that you care for them? Now that's in a positive sense in Psalm 8, right? Job is using that in a negative sense. What are human beings that you make so much of them that you set your mind on them, visit them every morning, test them every moment? Will you not look away from me for a while? Let me alone until I swallow my spittle. If I sin, what do I do to you, you watcher of humanity? Why have you made me your target? Why have I become a burden to you? Why do you not pardon my transgression and take away my iniquity? For now I shall lie in the earth. You will seek me, but I shall not be. There's a little word play here too. Why have I become a burden to you? And why do you not pardon my transgression? In Hebrew, the word pardon means to lift a burden from someone. Why do you not lift the burden of my transgression? So the word burden is, a form of the word burden is repeated there. That's the end of Job's commentary. Any comments there? We just went through, what, 2 chapters? Yeah, chapter 6 and 7. Any comments or questions? Okay, we may be able to get through one more chapter. We're not going to get through all of the chapters I wanted to today, but let's try to get through one more. Now it's Bildad's turn, the second of his friends. Chapter 8, verse 1. Then Bildad the Shuhite answered, how long will you say these things? And the words of your mouth be a great wind. He's calling Job a windbag. Does God pervert justice? Again, it's a rhetorical question. Obviously, his friends think that God never perverts justice. Everything that happens is just. Does God pervert justice, or does the Almighty pervert the right? If your children sinned against him, he delivered them into the power of their transgression. Again, pretty cruel here, saying, well, your children must have sinned, that's why they're dead now. But if you will seek God and make supplication to the Almighty, if you are pure and upright, surely then he will rouse himself for you and restore to you your rightful place. Though your beginning was small, your latter days will be very great. For inquire now of bygone generations. So he's encouraging Job to think about the teachings of the ancestors and consider what their ancestors have found. For we are but of yesterday, and we know nothing, for our days on earth are but a shadow. Will they not teach you and tell you and utter words out of their understanding? So he's saying, well, you know, listen, we as individuals, we aren't around here for very long, but we have generations and ancestors to learn from. Then he makes some metaphors to plants. Can papyrus grow where there is no marsh? Can reeds flourish where there is no water? While yet in flower and not cut down, they wither before any other plant. Such are the paths of all who forget God, and the hope of the godless shall perish. Their confidence is gossamer, a spider's house their trust. The parallelism there is, I don't know if you know what gossamer is, but when especially in the fall, in the cool fall, when there's a dew, you go outside and the grass is covered with delicate spider webs. That's what gossamer is. So this, their confidence is gossamer, a spider's house, their trust. It's all flimsy, is what he's saying. If one leans against its house, it will not stand. If one lays hold of it, it will not endure. Now this transition is problematic, in fact, because there's no transition, but there should be a transition here. Some commentators have made a guess that there's a missing verse. The NRSV is wrong when it translates, "The wicked thrive before the sun and their shoots spread over the garden." This translation assumes that he's still talking about the wicked. But why should the wicked thrive before the sun? It doesn't make any sense. And the Hebrew says simply, "They thrive before the sun and their shoots spread over the garden." So this is a transition to talking about righteous people. Okay? Their roots twine around the stone heap, they live among the rocks. In other words, they can live any place. If they are destroyed from their place, probably better would be if they are transplanted, so that it will deny them, saying, "I have never seen you." Verse 19 is a big problem. The Hebrew just doesn't make any sense. The NRSV has it, "See, these are their happy ways, and out of the earth still others will sprout." I don't know, it might be better to translate this. We're talking about these plants that have been transplanted. So maybe verse 9 should be, "They will move to another place and sprout from another ground." Anyway, that's the suggestion from the readings that I've done. Verse 20, "See, God will not reject a blameless person, nor take the hand of evildoers. He will yet fill your mouth with laughter and your lips with shouts of joy. Those who hate you will be clothed with shame, and the tent of the wicked will be no more." That's the end of Bildad's speech. I'm not going to start with Job's next speech because it's 2 chapters long, and there's no way we can get through that. But before we close out here, any other comments or questions? Janet.
I'm reminded when I look at Job 8:20, "Surely God does not reject one who is blameless or strengthen the hands of evildoers." I'm reminded of that passage, I think, which is in the Greek scripture, the New Testament, that says God will not quench a something or other wick, or
yes,
or do something to something else. What is it I'm trying to say, Steve? God will not quench a low burning wick.
A smoldering wick.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the next phrase is.
But it's similar, it's
similar, yes.
Not. In other words, when a human being is struggling, God doesn't come along and just smash them down.
Right. Yeah, thanks for that. Anything else before we end our session? Okay, thank you all for coming. I'm sorry we didn't get through the whole thing, but we'll take it up again next week.